All right, welcome back to another episode of Shifting Schools. Tricia and I found time to record another one. Yay! This is great. We're constantly going into, if this is the first time that you're listening to Shifting Schools, if you're a first-time listener of Shifting Schools, welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you're a long-time listener, thank you for sticking around. As if you've listened to last week's episode, we are all about our micro menu for generative AI in the month of May. If you missed last week's episode, I thought it was really good. I don't know about you, Tricia, but I thought it was a really good episode.
Well, it's always a joy and a pleasure to be chatting with you, my friend Jeff. So yeah, we'd love your feedback. Actually, we are trying something different this month. It's almost like a month-long challenge, I guess.
Ooh.
And I kind of think, like, listeners, we haven't done this for a while, Jeff, where the whole month is just us. We'd love listener feedback on that, because maybe we'll do another month-long challenge. Who knows? But if you missed last week, the premise is, yes, the month of May, all month long, we are sharing different micro menus with you to help you get experimental with your AI literacy. So last week, we talked about prompts to help with building community. This week, we're going to be talking about prompts that help us experiment with our feedback process. So again, each week, it's a new menu. It's a new series of prompts for you to play with. And you can download all of the prompts as well as the scaffolding for taking these prompts to your community inside of a free guide that's available at shiftingschools.com, or the link is over there in the show notes. So again, the free guide has the menus. It's got a protocol just to help scaffold that discussion of what you're talking about when you're talking about different quality generative AI prompts, to help you come up, hopefully, with some brand new ideas of your own. And to do it not on your own, but to do it even just with one other colleague. We really want folks to be taking a team-based approach to their AI literacy. So again, maybe you bring this to your team and you say, hey, what if we take this on as like a 4-week challenge? One different prompt to play out with each week. I could see really that just being like 15 minutes each week, I think is all we're talking about.
The other thing to think about too, and the reason why I love that we're doing this in the month of May, is if a lot of times this is the testing time of year. And if you are just finishing testing or you're in the middle of testing and your kids need a brain break, how fun would it be to just get in and start playing with it? And even you as an educator, May's a time when we can experiment with new things. We're winding down the school year. Things are coming to a close. You might have just got done doing your state testing or national testing. And there's this time period where we can play with some new things or experiment. What a great time to start really digging into generative AI. Take your baby steps, work with somebody else, throw a starter prompt in front of your kids and have a conversation about it and see what happens. What a great time to start exploring generative AI, I think, right here in the month of May, because it is a great time. In education, educators, you get these times throughout the year when there's times where the month of February is a go-go month. Like there's very few breaks. You've got your kids 5 days a week. You're just going at it. And then there's things like the month of May where this is an explore time. School year's winding down. You might have just gotten done with testing. How do we explore? How do we give kids brain breaks? And playing with generative AI tools that they're learning how to use and are going to need to know how to use might be a great way to just lower the pressure a little bit. You're still going to have learning. We're not saying there's no learning happening here. There's probably more learning happening here, I think Tricia and I would argue, but just it might be a really good time to dig into this. And I just want you to be in that frame as we're going through these prompts today. Real quick, Tricia, one of the things we want to, and we talked about this last week, so we won't spend a lot of time on it. You can go back and listen to last week's, but we make sure that we always have some kind of protocol to support educators when we're going through these, so that when you were doing this as a collaborative team, you've got some structure to the conversation. And we know that that's just good education. That's good teaching, whether you are an adult or students. And we use the structure in here. The protocol you've put in here is the use, fuse, news. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. And again, it's just meant to be scaffolding. It doesn't have to be a must-have, but it is, I think, a better tool than just saying turn and talk. Because sometimes I hear that and it's like, well, about what? And this is meant to give a little bit more support than that. So the use would be looking at the prompts and saying, like, what can I imagine I can almost immediately put to use? Or the fuse is looking at your expertise and understanding that you can make connections with other ideas or questions that you have. The news is like, what do you want to follow in terms of the conversation around this idea? So if you hear one of your colleagues talking about one of the prompts and a change they would make, what are some other questions that you want to have? And so the idea would be, maybe I've got this protocol projected as my team and I are exploring these. And I might just say to my teammates, like, okay, pick a use, a fuse, or a news.
Mm.
What are you thinking? And it's really just, it's as simple as some sentence starters, right? And I think, Jeff, you and I are huge believers in the power of choice. So it might be choose one or choose something else you want to talk about in, our initial look at the menu, just so that people feel like they've got a foothold into the conversation. So
Yeah.
all of that is inside the free guide, as well as you will find an editable Google Doc where your team can get in there, you can play with the templates and create your own. We've really tried to bundle together a team experience for you inside this free guide. And it is yet another free guide that's made possible in part because we're really proud of our sponsor partnerships. Jeff, I know you are super excited about the folks who are sponsoring us all month long. Tell us a little bit about why you're excited.
Yeah. Thanks, Tricia. Yeah. Our sponsor, they're going to be sponsoring here for 6 months. So you're going to hear a lot about Libra. We've got some conversations coming up with actual administrators, school administrators that are already leveraging Libra, but a shout out really to Libra.com. That's LEBRAHQ.com. They are a platform to support communities. And the platform is so easy to use and so powerful, specifically for leaders. That's really what it's made for. It's made for, say, superintendents, head of schools, your leadership team. Not saying that you can't use it in other ways, but that's really who it's for. And the idea here is to just create personal touch points. One of the things that we know is that we are in a time and space, specifically in education, where turnover is a big deal. We are in a teacher shortage. We are going to be in a teacher shortage for a while. And what we want to do and how do we keep the teachers that we need inside of our school systems? What we are finding is it comes down to creating really good community. I know that's going to shock everybody. It's like creating classroom culture. The culture of your school, your district, your organization matters. That is what Libra is focused in on. And they use a system that allows you to get these quick touch points. When we do research, and you can look at all the research out there. In fact, I don't know, Tricia, if you've seen this, the Pew Research just came out with new research about educators that shows that less than 50% of educators are telling young people that they should go into education.
Wow.
That's an issue. We have an issue inside of our organizations, inside education right now, that we are not even telling students that education is a good career path for them. And then we wonder why we're in a teacher shortage. And part of that is that we need to create stronger cultures. And one of the way you do that is have frequent touch points. You have frequent touch points with your employees. That is what Libra does, right? It's an integrated platform that integrates right into Outlook or Gmail. So you can send these emails quick. You get to quickly recognize employees. So you get to celebrate individuals when they go above and beyond. You get to create a positive and connected work environment. It's all about sending these quick hit emails. Everybody loves it when you say, Tricia, hey, congratulations. It's been 10 years of working here. I just wanted to send you a quick email and say, we really appreciate you having here. That makes everybody feel good. It makes everybody feel good. And that's what this is about. It's about helping you and supporting you in remembering important details. It will surface work anniversaries, birthdays. It automatically, because it's hooked into your HR system, it knows all of this data. And for you as a leader, you go to school that day, you open up librahq.com and it says, oh, here are 4 people who have birthdays. Here are 3 people who have work anniversaries. And within 5 minutes, that's its goal. Within 5 minutes, you have high touch points with your employees that help to build a stronger culture. It's incredible. And the other work I do, Tricia, is around generational leadership. And we're not going to go into it in this podcast, but I'd love to dig into this in a future podcast. This plays directly into what we're seeing about generational leadership, as we have multiple, like right now we're 4 or 5 generations in the workforce, and that's causing all kinds of issues. One of those issues is trying to communicate from generation to generation. And Libra supports that. Libra helps us make sure that our teachers don't leave. The average teacher right now, 3 years, 5 years. We're losing new teachers out of the bottom of this thing. And we got a sieve in education that we're not getting people to stay because we need to create stronger cultures. And that's what Libra does. I can go on, and I've probably gone too long. If you'd like to see a demo, if you'd like to request a demo, please reach out to me, jeff@shiftingschools.com. I'd love to take your leadership crew or somebody in leadership position on a demo of this. We will bring in the CEO of the program. He's the one that loves to do the demos. We're already seeing this make a difference in education. And it's such a great platform. Again, Libra HQ, Lebra HQ.com if you want to go have a look. And then reach out to me, jeff@shiftingschools.com, and we can set up a demo. But thank you to Libra and the Libra team for being a sponsor of our podcast and a sponsor of Shifting Schools, of the newsletter as well. Just such a great platform. And I'm so excited that they've signed on for 6 months to support us, and we can support them in talking about their products. Thanks again to Libra. All right, Tricia, let's get back to our menu. Let's start with, we did this last time, and I thought this was really good. We did this last week, if you want to go back and listen to our answers last week. But I like that we're just talking about, because you and I are doing so many trainings right now. I like that we're coming into the podcast and we're asking, okay, what questions are we getting asked lately? And how are you answering them? And I love this question because you and I get this, I think, a lot. You get done doing a training and somebody comes up to you and says, how do you keep up with it all? Do you ever sleep? There's so much out there. And then I get, thank you for doing the research for me. I like that part too. But talk to that if there are educators who are listening to this saying, I just don't have the time and space and mental exhaustion to keep up with it all. How do you answer that for educators? What are you telling educators these days?
Well, first and foremost, I like to remind people that regardless of what the topic is, you can never keep up with it all. You know, when I was a literature teacher, I was not reading every single new book that came out. If you're a PE teacher, you're not watching every single sports event that's happening in a given week. So I think we also have to release ourselves from this burden of thinking, keep up with it all. You cannot, the amount of information that's being produced around AI on a daily basis, let alone a weekly one, it's impossible. So let go of that. Our advice is find ways that you can experiment with the tool in the way that really works for you, but do it in a community-based way. So I think, Jeff, something that's been helpful for you and I with just keeping up with the research, with what's happening in the space is Jeff and I have our Slack space. This is where, we will share things asynchronously. We've got different channels. We have an AI channel. So anytime I come across something that's really interesting, often I will kind of leave it there. Maybe later we'll have a conversation about it. Maybe we won't. But I've started to kind of curate and leave, interesting things that are there. And if I'm in a school, it might be that, I've got my team, I've got people that are interested in different aspects of AI. Leverage that. I think sometimes we try to say, no, we all have to be listening to the same thing or watching the same thing or using the same thing. No, you don't. Like, really leverage that people are going to have different levels of interest. So maybe you've got a few people that are like really into podcasts. Hey, can you create a playlist of not the top 500, the top 3 episodes that you think are really great? Maybe you got people that really love the books, right? Again, just a list of 3. So I would say, again, have some kind of shared space where people can share the resources that they are into personally, but also be wary of oversharing every single thing all the time. Because, Jeff, if you and I shared in that Slack space every single piece of content about AI that we consume, that thing would never stop with notifications.
Yeah, nobody would ever go in there.
Yeah, but to be selective and really lean into your personal interest. But I would say, again, if I'm on a grade level team or a department level team, have somewhere that people can leave links and maybe just a quick note, like, why was this useful? Or if you are sharing a podcast episode, you can tell people like, hey, if you just listen to like 3 minutes, start it at minute 9.
Yeah. That's the nice thing about podcasts is you can say, hey, skip ahead to this part. You don't need to hear Jeff and Tricia ramble on about all their trainings. You can jump forward to the 15th minute, the way that it works. Yeah. Such great. And again, I love the idea of just a place to just share wherever that is for you, but make it an AI specific place so that you're sharing those AI little tidbits as they're coming out, because there's so many of them out there right now. You're not going to keep up with it all. It's a typical technology, especially when we're in an innovation era, which we are right now, around generative AI. There's just going to be a lot. So pick one or two things and
Yep.
be okay that there's only one or two things. All the time in my trainings, I love this, Tricia, and I'm sure you get this too. People will come up to me and say, have you heard about this AI, or have you heard about that AI? And I'll say, no. And then they look shocked. Like I know every AI that's out there. And they're like, what do you mean you haven't heard of this one? I'm like, I don't know all of the, there's way too many for even, you and I are fully into this, constantly doing research on it. And we can't keep up with every AI. And that's okay. That's all right. It's fine. Know the ones that you know, and be okay. And then create a way to share. And that's what Tricia and I have done with our AI channel in Slack.
So
The other
another
question we get
question.
asked a lot. Yeah, go for it.
Well, I know that you get this one all the time, and I love this question. And I kind of already know your answer, of course, because I've seen you answer this one. But it's one that I hope we'll talk a little bit about some of the reasons behind our yes. We
Mm.
get asked all the time. So, Jeff, I'm going to put the question to you. All right, I've been playing around with the free version of ChatGPT. Should I pay for the paid version? Should I go to the pro version and get my monthly subscription? Is there a big difference between the free and paid version of ChatGPT?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We get this all the time, and I would say it all depends on where you are in your own AI literacy. The free version, specifically ChatGPT, the free version will do almost everything you need to do as a teacher. Unless you have $30 a month sitting in a budget. Here it is May, and if you're looking over at your budget and you're saying, "Ooh, look, I've got some money left in my budget for this year," and you can get a principal or whoever to sign off on it, totally worth it. You are not going to be disappointed if you can spend $30 a month on the pro edition. But the free version, great start. And I would leverage the free version until you feel like you're ready for the next level. It's like swimming. We never jump into the deep end before you're in the shallow end, and you learn to swim and you learn to blow bubbles, and you're like, okay, I know how to float on my back. I know, and then we can get into the deep end. And I feel that's the same kind of way with this. You don't have to go there if you're not ready. And I think that's okay. And again, it'll still do everything. The way you prompt doesn't change. The outputs that you gave are actually longer when you pay for it, which is in a lot of times not good because I spend more time saying condense than I do anything else. But when you do pay for it, there are two things that really supports. And as educators, you need to know this. On the free version, this is the biggest thing for us in education to know. On the free version, any prompt that you give it is going back to OpenAI. And I'm just talking about ChatGPT, but they're all the same right here. On the free version, every prompt that you give it goes back, and they are gathering those prompts to help and support training the next model on the output. So, for example, if you're on the free version, and as everything else we should do in education, is you don't put in any student information. First names, yes, first names only is fine, but don't put in students' full names. Don't put any personal identifiable information known as PII. Those free versions, and that's not just ChatGPT, that's any free version that is out there. They're free because they're gathering the data to make their systems better. Now, when you pay $30 a month for the pro version, then you can, and on the pro version, you have to, this is good for everybody to hear, even if you pay $30 a month for the pro version, it is still gathering your prompts and using them unless you go in and switch a little button. So you do have the option, and this becomes the issue. If you pay $30 a month, you have an option in ChatGPT to go in and say, do not use my chat history. And the way you get there is down at the bottom left-hand corner, you'll have your name. If you click on that, you have to go into settings. And once you're into settings, you're going to go to data controls. And in data controls, there is a little switch that says chat training and chat history. And this will be where you can decide and you can actually turn off so that your chats aren't being used. Now, I still 100% still would not upload a full student's name, identification, birth date. I still wouldn't be doing that stuff. But it does allow us to go to that next level of keeping our stuff within a private section, right? So that's for $30 a month. Now, what I'm really supporting people on doing, Tricia, and we're having a lot of schools move this way, is ChatGPT has come out with ChatGPT Teams. And I think that is where most schools need to go. So if you're looking at your budget, because it's May, and you're saying, hey, we're a fourth grade team, what if we got a team account for fourth grade? Or maybe you're a principal and you're thinking, okay, what would it look like to start leveraging this? It's a little expensive and they're going to be expensive for a while, but ChatGPT Teams is $25 a month per person inside that team. But if you have a team account, that chat history is already turned on for you. Everything that you do within the team account is kept inside the team account. Nothing that you put in that team account is used for training purposes. Copilot does the same thing. If you're in a Microsoft world, Copilot is ChatGPT. Right? We talked about this in our last episode. Copilot is basically ChatGPT, and Microsoft rebranded it as Copilot. And they do the same thing. If you buy their enterprise section, then everything that you do inside of it is kept within the system. It also unlocks other things, like it allows you to create images. It allows you to upload PDFs or spreadsheets. There's other things that it can do, which is why you upgrade. But I really want to focus in on, you need to understand the privacy section is really what school districts and teachers need to know about when you upgrade. Yes, it unlocks the ability to make images, but you can do that otherwhere for free. And again, if you're doing it for free, they're keeping those prompts, right? But just know that's really why we're seeing schools and why we're starting to get into those conversations with schools around, okay, when you're ready, this is why you want to move there, because of the privacy that it allows us to have within education. And my focus right now is supporting schools in buying Teams accounts. I think that's where the power is, because it unlocks some other things that we're not going to go into in this episode. But just at a Teams level, it unlocks, think about it, it's called Teams. Like, we as a team now get to leverage prompts. We get to leverage our own custom GPTs. There's a lot of other things that it does, and it has that privacy piece that's already turned on. So that's why my recommendation is, if you're ready to buy, think about buying the ChatGPT Teams account. That would be my recommendation when you're ready to purchase an upgrade. Does that make sense, Tricia?
It does. And I think for those schools who are saying, our budget is not going to support that,
Yeah.
if, even just one person, like maybe it's the librarian, or again, maybe it's a member of the leadership team, is able to try it out for a month, I do think it's worth the experimentation and the conversation, because I think it will help you better have your thumb on the pulse of, what is this capable of right now?
Yeah.
Those of you who are interested in the research in terms of these generative AI models and the ways in which they are improving, it is the pro version that, is getting the updates faster. Those of you who might be following Wharton professor Dr. Ethan Mollick, he's also constantly sharing the research around different standardized tests and how GPT-3 versus GPT-4 is doing. And, at the time of this recording, he was commenting on how the paid pro version writes at a graduate student level, like,
Yeah.
a grad degree level, versus the unpaid, which is probably about a high school student level. And it's interesting to notice those differences and how it will handle different questions. I do think, as we're trying to keep our thumb on the pulse of where this is all headed, you'll have a little bit more, I think, an accurate perspective if you've experimented with that. Does every single member of the community need it right now? No, but I definitely think it's worth looking at and experimenting with.
Yeah. And also remember, I think the other thing I get asked a lot around the paid version is, by now, most people have heard that it's pre-trained on a set of data, and it is, but also know the paid version still is as well. The difference is, and you talked about this, the difference is when it's updated, but it's still pre-trained. That's what the P stands for in GPT, is pre-trained. And it's still pre-trained. So if you're on the free version, as of this recording, it is updated to January of 2022. So you're already using data it's trained on data that's 2.5 years old. And what I say in my talks all the time is, in other words, if you ask it about the ship that ran into the bridge in Baltimore, it has no clue that happened. It has no information about that event because that event just happened and it has no training data on it. Versus if the paid version, which you and I do have, Tricia, we have a Teams account here at Shifting Schools, but our Teams account was updated to April of 2023. So even though we're paying $25 a month, it is not Google. And I cannot stress this enough. People think that this is going to replace Google. It is not going to replace Google, not anytime soon. Google is still Google. This thing is a creation machine. But even our Teams account, the last time it was updated was April of 2023. So it's pre-trained on data that is a year old at this point of this recording. And you just need to know that it doesn't unlock this idea of, oh, now it's going to have the latest and greatest information that's on the internet. No, it doesn't. I asked it the other day about the ship that ran into the bridge in Baltimore, and it said, what happened? Where? That never happened. Or it came up with something that happened way in the past about another ship and another bridge, because that's its training data. It does not go out and seek the internet. And so just know that it does give you, from January of 2022 to April of 2023 is better, but you're not talking a lot better. That's not the reason why you upgrade for, to your point, the way that it writes, the responses that it gives, just the next training model that is around that data, not so much the data itself.
So, listeners, if you're hearing us talk about all of this and you're thinking, gosh, that sounds a little confusing, it is a little confusing. And I think part of the confusion with AI is changing not in a linear way. This is not like, okay, every few weeks this happens. It's changing exponentially. We're talking about exponential growth. And so, of course, part of this is going to mean we get confused a little bit, right? And that's why at Shifting Schools, Jeff and I have been sharing our drive framework. We talked about it a lot last week. We are hearing and seeing that schools and districts need an organizing principle to make sense of this turbulent time. And that's our way of doing just that. So, Jeff, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about next academic year and how people can reach out to learn more about the drive framework.
Yeah. So I think what we're seeing right now, and again, I'm doing a lot of work, especially at the leadership level. I'm talking a lot with superintendents, a lot of school principals. That's a lot of the work I'm doing right now around creating guidance for the state of Washington here, around with other states as well. And what we're seeing right now is we are seeing this push to get guidance and policies in place this school year so that we can hit next school year really ready to leverage this. And I think that is something that educators and superintendents and principals and the whole school community, that's really where we are across the board. Every education, every state that I'm talking to, every superintendent and principal that I'm interacting with right now, everybody's goal right now is, okay, let's get everything in place because next year, this is the year of innovation. Next year is the year of implementation. And I think that's where our professional learning is going, is starting to do a lot of professional learning around, okay, it's here. We've played with it. We're starting to think about the paid version. We're starting to see students are using it all the time. So it's time for us to move in this direction. How do we put guidance and policy in place, which is a lot of the work that I'm supporting now, so that we're ready to go next year. And I think we're going to see next year really be the year where we really dive into a lot of this professional learning and using frameworks like the Drive framework, which Tricia, you and I have been helping and supporting schools already as we're headed down that path. We're supporting schools in having a framework to look at, okay, and this is the thing that we're trying to tell schools. This isn't a one-off, right? You're not gonna be able to teach ChatGPT or generative AI in a 1 hour session on an August day before school starts. That's not how this works. We are finding, or I am finding, and Tricia, I'd like to know your point, what you're seeing. But in my trainings right now, I'm telling schools, when schools are bringing me in, I need a minimum of 3 hours to get us all to a base level, right? 3 hours to get to a base level. Then 3 hours after that, we start leveling up. And that's what the Drive framework is. The Drive framework is a framework that allows us all to get to a base level in the D. And then we start to level this up. And we went through that last week. So if you want to go back and listen to last week's podcast, we really break down that Drive framework and what that means. But it's going to take time. And I think we're seeing a lot of professional learning now that is starting to wrap in and integrate AI, generative AI, into all sorts of different professional development models. And I think that's where we're going to continue to see in the future as we go. So that's what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? What shifts are you seeing lately?
Well, part of that framework, it's also we're really big into this idea of human-centered AI literacy, right? It's not technology or tool first. We're not just interested in like, hey, these are the top 5 tools, go explore that. This is about our communities. This is about student learning first and foremost. And so I think a big shift that I've seen with our framework is when we dig into the executive function part, there's so much research out there about how critical executive function skills are for students. And at the same time, these are not skills that we're just born with, right? We need the opportunity to rehearse them. That's often when I'm seeing a real light bulb moment is teachers who might have had a little bit of resistance beforehand. I often will preface it with, I want you to think of that student who really deeply struggles with executive function. They really struggle with organization, with, mapping out like a study schedule or taking a larger task and breaking it down into smaller tasks. Do you have a student in mind? And usually teachers will say, I have multiple students in mind. Okay, great. Focus just on one.
Yeah.
And then we'll dig into some of the ways that AI can support that. And then immediately it's, I get it. This unlocks that
Mm.
door. So I think, again, when we really kind of dig into what's the difference this is going to make at a very deeply personal level for students, that can be really profound. Now, again, with working through this framework, it is not a one size fits all. Jeff and I customize it for the audience that we're working with. In order to do that customization, though, like we also need a little bit of time to do that discovery call. So if you are thinking about next academic year and you want a strategy for your AI literacy, reach out to us right now. Let's talk about whether or not our partnership will work and how we can take a framework like this and make sure that it's really honoring where you're at as a community and where you want to go. What's your school mission values? Like, how can we embed that in? That's really important to us as well. We're never doing that one size fits all approach. We've been on the other side of that. We know that it doesn't work.
Yeah. So we take a lot of time with that. And today, what we want to do is we're going to get into our May mega prompt free guide that Tricia created. And we're going to go in last week. If you want to go back and if you did listen to the last week, then please go back and you can listen to that. We dug into the community ones. This week, we want to dig into our feedback prompts to experiment with. And again, inside the guide, and you can download that. There'll be a link to the show notes or over on the newsletter, it'll be shared, or you can go get it at shiftingschools.com. If you want to, you can even pause. If you're in a place that you can pause the podcast here and go download that as we're walking through this. But Tricia and I want to talk about how you can use these. And one of the things that we talk about is that these are starter prompts. We give you, and I love what you said, Tricia. We don't talk about the tools. It's not about the tools. It's about the prompting. It's about how to use the tool. And so many trainings are, oh, here's 7 different AIs you can use. I don't care about the 7 different AIs. If you don't know how to prompt them, it doesn't matter how many tools you have, you don't know how to use it. So we're really focused on the deep learning of the interworkings of generative AI, because once you know that, it doesn't matter what the tool is. They're all going to work pretty much the same. So we're looking at the feedback prompts to experiment with inside our micro menu this week. And I will also say, if this is feedback is something you really want to play with, we did a webinar back in April that you can go and you can watch that asynchronously. We'll talk about that here at the end of the show of ways that you can even save $25 to go get that. And you can go in and we go through even more ways that you can use this for feedback in that, if that's something that you want. But Tricia, let's dig into a feedback prompt to experiment with. Which one of these prompts do you want to highlight today?
Right. And for folks that haven't downloaded the free guide, when you grab it, the week 2 menu has 6 different prompt templates. We're just going to talk about one. You want to look at all 6, grab that free guide. So again, each of the different templates has a different way of using generative AI to play around with feedback processes. I am going to talk about the feedback recipe generator. And here is the prompt template. And again, that word template is key because you go in, you customize, you change out some of the words. So here's that template. You are an expert in analytical thinking. Draft 3 different recipes for effective feedback in a, that's where you would enter the grade or the subject, classroom. Each recipe should place a different emphasis on a different skill set that is integral to communication. Your recipes should provide should provoke a conversation about what makes feedback meaningful in learning. So once I've entered that prompt, I'm going to have 3 very different, and again, that's why you have to specify, make them different recipes that are hopefully going to spark a conversation for my students. Or maybe I do this actually with a team of teachers. What makes feedback work, right? What must feedback include in order for somebody to take action on it? So I think when we're having conversations about assessment, sometimes we toss out that word feedback. And I don't even know if we're talking about the same thing around the
Yeah,
table,
so true.
Jeff. So this is meant to help either students give you some feedback on what makes feedback work for them, or you want to have that department or grade level conversation really unpacking that concept and generating maybe some stories about when has feedback worked better than other times for you as an educator. It's such an important conversation to have. And this is just one way to get it started.
And I think if anybody is listening to this and they just heard you read that prompt, I wonder how many educators and many listeners are saying, oh my gosh, you type all of that into ChatGPT? And the answer is yes. One of the things that we have to understand, and I like talking to educators about, is where we find a lot of people going wrong, kids included. I think kids are probably the worst, and we all are, right? This is a new way of thinking, is that we are so trained in prompting our computers in a way of Google. And I talk about this a lot in my trainings, that we have all been trained to talk to our computers as if they were Google, because for 30 years, that is pretty much all we had. And when I'm talking to teachers and they say to me, I've tried it, I've tried ChatGPT and I didn't get anything good out of it, it didn't work for me. It's probably because you're thinking that it's Google. And Google, we were all taught, is about the keywords and it's about being short. You would never go to Google and type in, you are an expert in analytical thinking. Draft 3 different recipes. It's going to go, you want what? I'm a what? You want me to do? No, Google's job is to go out and find you something and give you links to the something that you want. And ChatGPT, these generative AIs, this is the number one thing you have to understand. They're creation tools. They are not, capital N-O-T, not research tools. You want to do research? You go to Google. You want to create something? You go to generative AI. That is the switch in the mind. If you can think to yourself, and we need to support kids in this, you need to do research. You want to know how many dentists recommend Crest toothpaste? You don't ask ChatGPT. You go to Google and you do that research. But if you wanted to create some kind of feedback, you wanted to create something for you, you wanted to support you in doing something, that is what ChatGPT is for. That is what generative AI is. These are creation machines, not research machines. That's a great way, as of now. Think of them as, I need to create something, ChatGPT. I need to go research something, Google. There's no way. We should do this sometime. I'd love to copy and paste this into Google and see what happens. If you went to Google and said, you are an expert in analytical thinking, draft 3 different recipes for effective feedback in a classroom. Each recipe should have a different emphasis on a different skill set that is integral to communication. Your recipe should provoke a conversation about what makes feedback meaningful in learning. Google will probably blow up. It's not made to do, it's probably going to give you back stuff that doesn't, nothing. It's going to give you back nothing is what it's going to do. Nothing that's useful, because that's not its job. And so we have to think about how we communicate to our computers in 2 different ways.
And
And the one thing,
but at the
go for it.
core, Jeff, what we're talking about when we're talking about prompt craft is writing. We are talking
Yes.
about why quality writing matters. And I think, I love putting together these prompt templates. Why? Because I love writing and I've
Yeah.
always loved teaching writing. And that's where, again, you can really dig into word choice, the right action verb, different phrases, different framing. And you're absolutely right. I usually say to people, this is wonderful for fiction, terrible for fact.
I love that.
And, I love writing and I love using this to help me clarify some of my writing. So,
Mm.
all of these templates are human generated. I generated them. However, every once in a while, I will grab one and I will also ask for feedback on my feedback prompts. And I'll say, like, what about this might be confusing?
Mm.
So, if you also are thinking, Does generative AI kill writing? No, I really think it's the opposite. I think it has gotten me excited about writing in an entirely new way because, yes, the difference in putting together a high quality prompt rather than something that, you haven't spent a lot of time thinking about, massive difference. And I usually will also mention to teachers, you know what else? This is a really great way of framing how do we interact with others when we're asking a question.
Mm,
The difference between asking a thoughtful, well constructed question versus something that's just like a few words that you didn't spend time thinking about. So
exactly.
this is just a great reminder of like the power of drafting and redrafting.
I love that. And inside this prompt feedback, these 6 prompt feedbacks, when you download the guide, you get 6. We're only talking about 1. But Tricia also demonstrates to you one of the powerful ways of prompting. And when we're talking about ways that you can prompt this, one of the things that you do and is showing really great results is you give your prompt a persona. And you'll notice in this one, in the feedback recipe, the very first line, we set the persona. We tell ChatGPT, we type in to ChatGPT, you are an expert in analytical thinking. And when you do that, you are actually accessing the knowledge base around what does it know about analytical thinking, right? So giving it a persona is so critical. And it's such a great way to do this. Other ones, just real quick. You are an expert in communication, or you are a conflict management specialist, or you are a highly trained mentor, or you are a highly motivated student, or you are an inspiring, pick your career, right? But students can do this too. Students can say, you are this character out of a book, or you are a mathematician, or you are a mathematician tutor, or you are. Giving it a persona gets you better results. You would never go to Google and say, you are a mathematician. Google would say, you want mathematicians? Here's a list of mathematicians, right? So that's just a prompt tip for you. And depending on the prompt that you're giving, think about, can I give it a persona, right? Because when you give it a persona, it accesses that knowledge base that it's trained on and says, oh yeah, I know about analytical thinking. I know about conflict management. Now I will take that, and it like puts that hat on and then reads the rest of your prompt. So that's just a really good tip that Tricia shows in all of these prompts, is how you can have it take on different personas to help and support you in creating the thing that you need to create.
And we want folks to experiment with that. So, part of this month long exploration, and then at this point, you've got 2 different menus to play with. We would strongly encourage you think about, hey, for the month of May, 1 menu each week, tap the shoulder of one colleague and explore these. It's not just about having the menu, but it's really about how do you gather your peers? How do you gather your community around some of these ideas in order to generate your own? So, like last week, we'd recommend maybe just take 15 minutes. Your next team meeting, host a miniature size prompt hackathon.
I
Take a
love
look,
that.
try some of these templates out, generate your own. The free guide sets you up with all of the tools that you need in order to try that. But again, I think the idea is, yes, a barrier to entry for AI is the fear of failure. But for
Mm,
me, like a mini hackathon, it's like, of course, in just 15 minutes, we're not going to solve all of the problems of the world. The idea behind a hackathon is like, let's try things out. Some of it won't work well, but one new idea might. So I think, again, get people around it. And again, just encourage experimentation and encourage that kind of willingness to try something totally different.
yeah, and you can use these as your starter prompts, right? Just use this as a starter prompt. If I'm with my PLC, we're all going to start with the same prompt, and then you hack it up. What did you change? Did it give you the output you wanted? If you change this thing. And here's the crazy part. And I was just thinking about this as you were talking, Tricia. You do this for 15 minutes. This thing is so fast. You could probably, its responses take somewhere between 10 and 15 seconds on average. You think how many different prompts you could do in 15 minutes? You'd end up with all kinds of really cool hacked prompts. The other tip, and we're starting to see this, and Tricia, you can talk about this because I think you have some structures around this. But the other thing that we're seeing teams starting to do is if you get a prompt that's giving you really good outputs, save that somewhere. I have sticky notes. I'm on a Mac and I've got the little sticky program on my Mac. I've got sticky notes of, I found a prompt that really works good when I need to break down data. I've got a prompt that really works good for descriptions when I'm doing a session at a conference. I found one that I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing's blowing it up. So I've kept it. So find a way for your team as you're doing these hackathons. If somebody gets a really good prompt, find some way to keep that and share that so that you can keep using that prompt in the future. Do you have any ways that you've seen people or teams keep those?
Well, interestingly, Jeff, a piece of advice that I give in trainings is have an analog space.
Mm,
Doesn't have to only be an analog space, but go old school with the bulletin board, because I do think sometimes it's that, like, I'm in the staff lounge and it can be like, maybe the goal is we're going to highlight like one new prompt a week. I really encourage people, like, have that physical space too, because I find sometimes those physical spaces also really lend themselves to, I'm having a cup of coffee, I'm talking to Jeff in the staff lounge. Oh, that's interesting. Hey, you know what else I would try with that? Again, I think sometimes we forget about some of the older technology, like bulletin
mm.
boards, that can be so useful when we have
Oh, I
new
love that.
technology as well. So again, we'd love to see if you take on that idea, the bulletin board where you're sharing your prompts. We'd love to see a photo. Please consider sending that over to us. And
That's
again,
a
I
great
just want
idea.
to mention, like, with that, it doesn't always have to be like prompts for work. It
Yeah.
can be things that you are using for your personal life for fun.
Yeah. Well, one of the prompts we always do in my trainings is we have it create recipes, and everybody loves it because everybody's looking up recipes online, and or a meal plan or something. To your point, it doesn't all have to be about work. And when you're experimenting with something, trying to figure out where it fits outside of work, how does it impact me uh, personally, is also just a great way to play with it. Well, I hope you like these episodes. If you do like these episodes where it's just Tricia and I really digging into prompt engineering and sharing some of our ideas and our mega prompts, please do give us feedback on these. We're not interviewing somebody else, where it's just Tricia and I talking through what we're doing, the trainings that we're doing, some of the real prompt engineering stuff. If you're liking these episodes, please do give us feedback somewhere. You can either rate and respond anywhere that you listen to your podcast, or please email us info@shifting schools, or Tricia@shifting schools, or Jeff@shifting schools, or go to your social media and say, everybody should listen to this Shifting Schools podcast episode. We'd appreciate that too. So please do give us feedback if you like these. Give us feedback if you don't like these. If you're saying you guys talk way too much, stop talking so much, please tell us that too. We can go back to interviewing people as well. I do want to say, as we're getting ready to leave, you can save $25 on any of our asynchronous workshops and our workshops coming up. In fact, we have a new one coming up here in May called Foundational AI Literacy that we will be doing. You can save $25 on that too. All you need to do is, when you check out over at shiftingschools.com, is you just put in the code SSPOD25, all capitals, SSPOD25, one word, and that will take $25 off any one of our asynchronous things that we've done in the past that you want to go back and do that, or it'll take off $25 on our Foundation AI Literacy webinar that we have coming up. And this is our self-paced 45-minute course. It's for K-12 school leaders who understand artificial intelligence. You can head over to learn more. That is coming up here in the month of May as well. So we're very excited about that. And there's all kinds of other things over there. Again, you save $25 on everything for being a podcast listener by using that code SSPOD25. Tricia, any last words as we get ready to sign off?
Just looking forward to seeing folks, hopefully again next week. Again, all month long for May. Each week, it's going to be a new micro menu to set you up with some prompts to experiment with. So hope that you are back with us again next week as we dig into the third of 4 mega prompt menus. Thanks again for listening.
Thanks, Tricia.
Thanks, Jeff.